Hello, welcome to the Education Concierge podcast. I am Benita G, your Education Concierge, and today we have an amazing guest on our podcast.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain to you some reasons why. Number one, it's free. Come on now. Who does not love free? Number two, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Who doesn't love easy? Number three, Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you. It can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more podcast theaters. So you're going to give it to me for free. I can make a podcast from my phone or my computer anywhere, and you're going to distribute it for free. This is amazing. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Oh, wait, there's a little bit more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. This is simple, easy, accessible. This is how I podcast. Hey guys, this is Benita G with the Education Concierge podcast, and I have with me an amazing guest. He is an award-winning author and sports writer, and he's an adjunct professor and motivational speaker. So if you could clap it up wherever you are, and let's introduce our first guest. Sir, can you tell us more about yourself and your profession?
Sure. My name is Jerald Hoover. Jerald Hoover, Jerald. Also go by Professor Hoover in certain circles. As you mentioned, I am an adjunct professor at Long Island University, Brooklyn, where I teach sport management or sport communication. And that's because I've been a sports writer for about 20 years. I've been blessed to cover everything from NBA Finals with Shaq and Kobe, the late Kobe Bryant. And I got a chance to cover David Robertson, Tim Duncan, people like that. But because I'm in the New York area, so when the New Jersey Nets were led by Jason Kidd, and they went to the finals 2 years in a row in the early 2000s, I was blessed to cover, those events. We didn't win, they didn't win, but I got a chance to be there. I was blessed to cover Michael Jordan's comeback with the Washington Wizards, which was a complete circus, if you would, and I said it in a good way, at Madison Square Garden. I covered All-Star games, you name it. So I've been doing that quite a while, where I cover more basketball, the NBA, if you will. I've been an adjunct professor for 6 years now, and I love it because I get a chance to share my experiences as an author as well as a sports writer. Me being an author, I've been writing books since I was 8 years old, actually. But I started writing this particular book series, which we'll go into later, when I was 17. It's called the Hero Book Series. And I'm a motivational speaker. And I love everything I do, but I'm really proud of motivate young people verbally, if you would, because I grew up with a stuttering problem, a speech impediment. I stutter and I talk fast. And so the fact that I can earn a living as a motivational speaker and teacher, getting up in front of people, it's amazing, because people who know me, even family members growing up, always know me as a stutterer. So for me to be able to translate or transition from being a stutterer, a person with a speech impediment, and not letting that bother me or hurt me as a handicap, and to go on to make a living as a motivational speaker is a major accomplishment.
Wow. So we have NBA sports writer, basketball sports writer, adjunct professor, and a motivational speaker with a lot of different aspects of how you can motivate our young people. So I want to go back because you started speaking about what we're going to talk about today, which is your book series. Your book series is titled Hero. And you said you've been writing since the age of 8, and then you started writing the book at the age of 17. Why?
Yeah.
Like, what possessed you? Was it a teacher, or was it like, I just need to write this down? I think this is amazing. Or how did you start writing at the age of 8?
Well, the book that I wrote in the age of eight, it's called I Was a Sad Boy. And I wrote that because my mom and dad, as a matter of fact, today is the anniversary of my dad's passing. He died in 1989, April 20th. It was a Monday. And so he's been gone for quite a while. But I still think about him every day. But my mom and dad were going through a divorce. What used to make me sad was the fact that my dad wasn't around. And seeing classmates, with their fathers around, when they were either they would come to school to pick them up, or just seeing them with their dad, or really in particular when I would see baseball games, because I've always been a big sports fan. I would see baseball games, and I would see a player hit a foul ball into the stands, bleachers, if you would, and to see like a man pick up the ball, or finally get the ball and give it to a child, like I presume it'll be their son. That I used to be inspired, but it used to make me sad. So certain things like that made me sad. So I just started writing things down that sort of made me sad. Didn't know that was a form of therapy by journalizing certain things that I was feeling. Instead of internalizing it, I wrote things down. And so that was called, again, I Was a Sad Boy. And I basically just wrote down my thoughts. Again, didn't know that I was, doing certain things to make myself feel better, if you would. I didn't realize that was the purpose of me doing it. And then when I was 17, when I was in 9th grade, I was 15, I believe, I wrote a book. And it was, can't remember the name of it, but I got to it on the 5th chapter. And for some reason, I let a teacher discourage me. I never forget that. I can't remember what was said, but I know that they said certain things that sort of discouraged me. But the book was about 2 young men, one black, one white. And I was, I made them best friends. And I did that because I wanted to inspire social change. Because around that time, racism is bad now, but it was really, really bad. Because you had a lot of public situations where you had blacks and whites actually openly fighting with each other. And so I wanted to put something on paper to sort of encourage people not to do it. But I didn't finish it. And now, when it came down to the Hero book series, and this is because my dad, unfortunately, had fell into a life of drugs and alcohol, and a lot of members of his family had done it, had been either alcoholics or drug addicts. And as a matter of fact, my grandparents on my father's side were both alcoholics, so it ran in his family. His 2 sisters, his brother-in-laws and nephews and so forth. So a lot of people that I knew from my family kind of went that way. And I wrote a speech. And I wrote a speech, and the speech was written as a 17-year-old to other 17-year-olds. And the speech was basically something that I wanted to encourage young men and young women to not do drugs, don't do alcohol, don't mess up, make the best of your life for as long as you have to live it. But I didn't have any place to put the speech. In other words, there was no medium for me to put the speech, because we didn't have fax machines, we didn't have social media, we didn't have anything like that. So I was thinking, like, wait, what am I gonna do with this speech? And one day I was playing basketball in a place called 4th Street Playground, and I had an epiphany. I literally had an epiphany while I was playing basketball, and voice told me to write a book and put the characters and make one of the characters give that speech at a certain part of the book. And that was in June of 1983, June and July 1983, because it was in the summertime. It was in the warm months. And I let the story marinate in my spirit. Like every day it was like something was gnawing at me. And, write this book. It really is something like that was gnawing at me. And then I finally got the courage and the wherewithal to write and started writing. Now, when I started writing, it was October 17th, 1983. All right. I didn't have access to a typewriter. Now, notice I didn't say anything about a computer. I said typewriter. I said typewriter or anything else to write with. Now, even though my mother was working for IBM, she couldn't afford to get me a typewriter. She definitely couldn't afford to get me a computer. So I had gotten a spiral notebook, and I started writing my ideas down, and I just started writing. Now, the interesting thing about that is I had a gift to write. As I told you, I was writing. I wrote when I was eight years old, and I wrote when I was in the 9th grade. So writing was always easy for me. But reading books wasn't something that I did all the time. And even to the point to when I had book reports in schools, especially if it was a book report that maybe something that was on TV, like say a TV show like Roots back in the day. People wouldn't know that now. Well, young people wouldn't know what that is, but like, or maybe a Martin Luther King type of story, or something that was on television, or was a documentary that was a book before. I can watch a documentary. I can read maybe the liner notes of a book, and then from the cover notes. I could read that and read a couple of pages in the book and write a fabulous book report and get like no less than a B that. And so I did that basically from 9th into the 12th year, where I cheated the system. Now, I'm not saying I never read, because I did read a lot. I used to read. I read my Bible a lot, but I haven't read a Bible like I am now because I didn't understand it. But I love to read magazines. You know, I'm a big sports fan. I read any kind of magazine, Sports Illustrated, any kind of basketball magazine, newspapers from cover to cover. So I did all that, but I didn't read the actual book. And when I finished the draft, it took me about maybe 6 months to do it because I was doing it by hand. So everything I wrote by hand from chapter 1 to chapter 20. I wrote by hand. So I finally gave it to a cousin of mine to let him read it. Gave him the notebook. And I gave it to him in church one Sunday, and I said, I wrote a book. I want you to take a look at it because I respected his opinion, or older cousin. And he said, okay, give me a week or two to read it. And so he went through it. And so I saw him in church the following week. And then I saw him, and I said, hey, Ron, so what do you think? And he says, well, I'll call you tonight. Now I'm thinking that he's going to tell me how great the book was, and you know, just tell me like tell me on the spot now how great it is. Let's find a publisher. Let's get it done. You know, and he was like, "No, I'll call you tonight." And he called me. I'm gonna cut the story short because I told the story so many times. But he called me that night and tore me to shreds. I mean, literally. You know, I mean, he didn't call me any names or anything like that. It wasn't that kind of shreds. But he just let me have it. He just let me know, you don't read books. You don't do this. You don't do this. You don't do this. And then, of course, I said, well, I do read. I don't, you know, what do you, and then he says, no, he said, you don't read. That's what it was. He said, you don't read. I said, well, I do read. He said, what do you read? I said, I read newspapers and I read the Bible. And then he tells me, he said, that's great if you want to be a journalist or a preacher. Now, what's funny about that was I ended up becoming a journalist for like 20 years, and I ended up being a Sunday school teacher or superintendent, if you would, teach Sunday school. But like since, I don't know, maybe 20 years now, I've been doing it now. And so it was kind of funny. So he kind of spoke that into existence in a certain way. But he made me read 5 books. He said, in order for me to get this draft back, you got to read 5 books. Because this thing was, he said, you got to be a writer. I mean, you got to be a reader if you want to be a writer. You know, in other words, you got to understand. And see, I thought the opposite. Because I'm thinking like, why do I need to read books if I'm a writer? And I even thought so much that I was going to brag that I wrote this fabulous book without reading. Ooh. Now, of course, but see, this shows you the difference between being a young knucklehead as opposed to being a mature man. Because only a young knucklehead is going to think to brag on television or the radio or whatever medium you're on and say, hey, I wrote this fabulous book, but guess what? I don't like reading books. You know, and I always say, that's almost like telling a chef. That's almost like a chef going on television saying, hey, come to my restaurant. You know, we have a great menu. We have this, you that, but this and that and the third. But he says, I hate eating, but I hate food. You think, I'm not going to that restaurant. You know, if you don't like food, why should I like food too? Especially yours. And so, but now what he did was he opened my eyes to a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Because now here's what he said too. He said, don't try to be slick because I'm going to ask you questions. Because in his house, he had like a library. He had a library of books in his house. He had he had an office that it looked like a library, literally. He had books all over the shelf. I mean, just books. Because he was the type of person that would read a book a week. I mean, he just go through books like that. And so He said, he said, don't try to be slick because I read every book out there. So he scared me on that. So I'm thinking, oh man, now I got to read because my thinking was, let me go to the end of the notes and just try to do like I've been doing. But this time I knew I had to read for real. So it was a Sunday. So that Monday I went to school and I took out 5 books. And I remember the first book was Miss Jane Pittman. The movie became a movie with Cicely Tyson, and I got 4 of the books written by S.E. Hinton. She was a big young adult author at the time, and so the first book I read was the Miss Jane Pittman. And what was so amazing was I read the book in like 2 days, but what I was doing was trying to memorize everything that I was reading. I was like reading, and I was trying to memorize every scene that I read. And so forth and so on. And I read the first book, and for some reason the light went off in my head. I was like, oh man, reading is great. I just fell in love with reading. And then I started seeing where I was making mistakes. Then I read the other book within 2 or 3 days. Then I read the other book within 2 or 3 days. But I'm still memorizing things that's going on with the books. And so 10 days later, I read all 5 books for less than 2 weeks. And so now I'm ready for the test. I'm ready for him to ask me any question about any book, because I told him the books I was reading and gave him a list of the names and who's the author, all that kind of stuff. So he gives me my manuscript back and says, okay, now rewrite it. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, okay, where are my questions? You know what I mean? He's like, I'm not going to ask you anything. Oh, man, I wanted to strangle him, man. I was hot because I was going to get to the point to where if he started the question, I was going to just end it right there. You know what I mean? So you want to get one of them students in class where they know the answer and they raising their hand, ooh, 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 ooh. I was waiting for that. I was on that level, and he'd asked me one question, and I was just fire mad. But what that did was gave me something that no other book was happening at that time, and I tell you what I mean. It took me from 1984. To 1992 to get the book published. Right. Now, mind you, let me repeat that. To get it published, I didn't finish it. It was finished, but it took 8 years to actually get published because I kept getting rejected. I got rejected about 42 times. So I was sent it to a publisher, and they would tell me how good the book was, and then that last line, they would give me some line like it's not right for their list. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking, okay, so then I'll just get the manuscript and I'll touch it up again. I'll go over it and, change some things around or whatever. And send it out to another place. Rejection. Did the same thing. So I probably did about 60 drafts. And I love telling the story too, because when I'm in front of a classroom or a stage or somewhere, and I got a teacher near me or whatever, or a bunch of kids in the class, the students in the class. When I say I did 60 books, the teacher like say 60. Repeat that again. Of course, when I say 60, and then the kids are like, "Oh, why you did that many drafts?" But the beautiful thing about that is that because what the teacher does, and I kind of like when she does it, he or she, is that they're letting the students know you can't expect to do this in one draft. Yes. You know what I mean? And this happens with a book report, an essay or something like that. They'll write one draft or half a draft, whatever, and give it to the teacher and think it's, Shakespearean stuff, And I get it because, I wanted to be on stage talking about my book before it was even finished. So I get it. But what this did was in the 9 years it took me to get from 1983 to 1992 to get the book and actually in book form. It taught me so much about life, how to do things. I became a businessman. And one of the things that helped me from the standpoint when my cousin told me that, he was going to ask me those questions was that because I kept getting rejected by these publishers, my thought was I'm going to put essay questions at the end of the book. And lo and behold, I put essay questions at the end of that book, and it became something of a different level. And that's not the curriculum part. But this was just essay questions that when a child read the book, mm-hmm. if they wanted to do a book report or an essay, the questions were everything in the back of the book form.
And they were ready to go. I'm sitting here taking notes while you're talking because I'm switching up some questions while you're speaking because I'm pulling a lot out of this. So I'm going to go back for a moment. So you actually did like a self-therapeutic, I don't even know what the word is. Like you did self-therapy when you realized that I need to write this out. What's happening to my family, the dynamics of my family are changing, they're switching, they're moving, and I seem to be great at this writing thing. So let me just write this out, not only at a young age, but then as you transition into a middle schooler, into a high schooler. So my question for you is, because I am a educator always first of middle school. I love middle school. What can I do as a teacher or as a parent, for my parents that are listening, to even motivate a middle schooler, Black or brown, young man who, middle school, you're just going through something anyway. It doesn't have to be traumatic or dramatic. It can be you wore the wrong shoes the day and you couldn't participate in gym and you love gym. It could be you don't have the newest shoes and somebody was janking on you in class. It could be anything. So what would be some steps or something to like motivate parents or motivate teachers? And I'm going to come back to the other teacher in a minute. To motivate teachers to get our young men, our young boys to start writing and reading more.
Well, one thing I do is when I ask people what they want to be in life, I allow them to say what they want to say. You know, a lot of times I hear rapper, I hear ball player, I hear this, I hear that. And I stop saying, well, if you want to be a rapper, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. Because I definitely wouldn't want somebody to tell me I couldn't be a writer. And I've heard that before. So you don't want to kill a kid's dream.
Yes.
But what you want to do is say, look, I want you to be in a position where you can make millions and millions of dollars for yourself. But I also tell them this. If you cannot read properly a contract, if you cannot write or sign your own name, and you can't count your own money, if you have to rely on someone else to do that for you, then there's a very good chance that they're going to count it for you, and there's a lot of things that will become missing, if you know what I mean. In other words, you end up grossing $18 million, and all of a sudden you go 10 years down the line, you find that all you have is $1 million in the bank, and you owe the IRS, you know, all kinds of money because you allow somebody else to do certain things for you. So if you cannot take control of your own self by being able to read, write, and think, then you're going to lose out. So anybody that wants to be a businessman needs to do this. You want to be this, you want to do this, you want to do it. And then now this new development that I hear that I found out, when I found out that most CEOs read upwards of 50 books per year.
Yes.
And most employees, people that work for them, read on average 2.
Yeah.
And so what I did with those numbers, I play with them. I say, okay, a person, if you say 50 books a year, so I say, well, on average, it could be anywhere from 60 books at the high end and 40 books on the low end. That's still more than 2 books a year, right? And so I'll go with that. But now let's go on the other side. Let's say high end is 3 books or 4 books. And then low end might be 1 or 0. And then you see why so many people are living below a certain level of equity and what have you. I said, because if you don't put certain things in your brain and allow that brain to become as powerful as it can become, then you can always be a slave to someone else because you won't be able to think. You won't be able to you'll let somebody think for you. You can't live like that. You know what I mean? And so when I start talking about the benefits of actual reading, right? There are tangible benefits to reading books where they relieve stress, they improve memory, they improve sleep, and those type of things can improve your health. Then I hate to even talk about this when I talk to parents, but there was a study that came away with 85% of high school dropouts die before the age of 35.
Wow.
So 95, no, it was 85 or 95, but I can't remember what it was. Was a big percentage. High school dropouts die before the age of 35. That's scary. Then I really hit them with this one, especially if I have a mature crowd. I say, we can't keep allowing ourselves to become smart in jail. And what I mean by that is, it shouldn't take you doing 7 to 10 while living in a 7 by 10 before you pick up a pen.
Wow.
So it shouldn't take you being locked up like an animal before you decide to read your first book or write your fourth poem or write your first letter. It shouldn't take that. Because then, as a black person or a person of color, black or brown, young man particularly, you're already behind the 8 ball with society. Then you're gonna turn around and put a record on yourself on your plate too. You really gonna make yourself really behind. You really gonna put yourself, you're tying your head behind your back. You know what I mean? And so when I start putting in those facts and figures and different things of that nature, and I don't do it in a way where I'm trying to degrade, I'm doing to try to implore, to say, listen, even if it means reading a book that was of only 100 pages, you just start off slow if you need to. A lot of times when people want to eat something from the sea, they go for the whale. And then when they realize they can't eat the whale, they stop trying. Okay, eat a goldfish first. Okay, if it means eat a goldfish, it doesn't mean you're thinking small. It's what you're doing is building up a tolerance. So, okay, eat goldfish first. Then as your appetite gets better, then go for the whale. And so because especially when you gotta get a person doing something for the first time, you gotta, start off a certain way. But what I do is I try to get them to look at the end result of why you should do certain things, as opposed to trying to fuss at them and this, that, and you definitely want to say you're never going to be nothing. You always want to be encouraging, but you want them to see what happens if you don't read and what can happen if you can.
I think you can be encouraging, but also realistic at the same time.
No question.
So I'm going to go back because the teacher, I'm really upset with the teacher, and I apologize on behalf of all teachers that the teacher you had was wrong, and discouraging you from writing or continuing to write.
Well, put it this way, it wasn't a person of our color.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. It wasn't somebody that can identify what I was trying to do.
Right. So then that leads me into a couple of more questions about that. And so my next question is, you were able to just say, when I'm motivating young men, when I'm motivating anyone, I have to say to them, these are the statistics. This is the real part of it. This is why we need to read. This is why you need to write. Mm-hmm. I will have to admit, as a teacher beginning, I would say, if you can read, you can write. And then I started teaching real children. And I was like, that's not true. Some of my students are, like you said, like you knew that you were gifted. Like some of my students are just, they can write an essay for me. And I'm like, this is the most amazing thing I've read in a long time. Mm-hmm. And I know that they are just like you, when they skimmed through the book, they read the cliff notes, and they were able to just write this amazing essay. Mm-hmm. Could read, but reading was not there. They were like, I don't want to do that. And then on the flip, I had students who were amazing readers, would read tons and tons of books and would give me essays that we would have to write 50 or 60 times. Mm-hmm. And so I have learned that they do not always come together as easily as we say in the field of education. Mm-hmm. So then my next question to you is, how did you get, writing came easy to you, and I'm thankful for your family member who was like, yeah, I'm gonna need you to read some stuff and then come back. And S.E. Hinton students, y'all, we still read him. His books are still popular with my boys. I have to say that, like, they still, once they find them, they're like, oh, it's a series of books like your books. They read the whole series and they love them. How do you how did you go adding the questions in the back of, well, first of all, let's go back. Tell me about your series, and then tell me why you added questions at the end of the chapters.
Okay. The series. Now, when I first wrote the book, I had it as a cliffhanger. All right. So I always had in my mind that I can sneak in a second book, but hey, I had to get the first one published first. Okay. And so it was called My Friend, My Hero. And for those young people, I'm not going to say too much, but I'm not going to give too much away. But for those old heads that might be listening, if you remember the TV show Dallas, they had a character by the name of J.R. Ewing, and something happened with J.R. Right? I'm like, I don't want to say what it is. Something happened with J.R. and it was a matter of who did this to J.R. And so that was going on. So I put some elements of that in it. So what I did was I wanted to add some comedy, some drama, some mystery, some suspense. So I wanted to put all those little elements in it, and because I wanted you, the reader, the non-reader, to keep turning the page. All right. So my thinking was, I'm gonna make this book as quick as possible. Now it was over 100 pages, like 100, in this format, it's 140 pages, but it's a quick read. There's a lot of dialogue, so it's not a lot of narrative description, and so you can get into the scenes, and it's relatable, with women, it's relatable to men, relatable to old and young. The way I wrote as a flashback, and it's called My Friend, My Hero, the first book. The second book is called He Was My Hero 2, and 2 is TOO, not TWO. Third book is A Hopeful Hero, and the fourth book is called Hoop Hero. You notice the word hero, and I love asking this question with students. What's the word you hear in all the books? And I hear hero, and they all say it at one time. And the reason why I do this is because when you see the people on the covers, they're not people that don't look like you. They're people that look like you, right? And they're either coming out of a school, they're coming out of a boys club, they're coming out of, or they're in the city, all right, or they're in the playground.
Right.
Okay. There's no guns. There's no women scantily clad. You know what I mean? There's no cigarettes and all that kind of stuff. No, you see basketball, you see books or something like that in their hands, or book bags in their hands. Now, what I did was I put two boys on the cover and 3 girls on the cover. I did that by design to let you know that there's girls in these books as well. That's just putting all just boys. All right, so that was by design. I made it so that people can relate to it. I made each book so that there is a cliffhanger of some kind at the end of each book where you want to read more. So I cut it off at a certain point. I just made it so that it's a lot of fun. And the thing I love, Ms. Gordon, is that I would say 99.9% of the people who read the book would tell me that they can relate to it.
Yeah.
When I get that, then I know that this is something that can travel far and wide, to the point to where, now I told you I got rejected 42 times. Now the book over 28 years in existence.
Right.
Now on the cover it says 25-year anniversary, but in 2 more years we're actually going to be at 30, and that's amazing because for me to take 8 years, I started in 93. I'm 83. I got published in 92. For it to take 9 years from the inception to publication, and then from now, I'm almost celebrating close to 30 years of being in existence. The same story. It's amazing because now it has gotten published and republished 6 different times.
That is amazing. So then you picked up on the next thing, whereas how did it go from, because I'm a teacher, I'm always searching for books. Like there's a group of us on Twitter, as soon as we see a book, we're like, oh my goodness, you need to read this book. I think, and specifically at times we are targeting our boys, because in middle school there's just a struggle sometimes to get them to read. And so I have magazines, I have sports magazines, and I believe reading is reading. So I have sports magazines. I now have some history books. I have science fiction. I have like everything. I'm trying to, like, okay guys, come on, let's read this book together. I have books about every type of sport. Now I have, oh my goodness, somebody brought, they take the book and turn it into a comic, but that's not the right wording for it. But I'm gonna come back to that. So all of that I've got.
Graphic novel.
Thank you.
Graphic novel.
We have graphic novels, and people have donated, and I have begged, borrowed, and stolen, like to make sure my classroom has books, not only for them to read just in their spare time, but then we do like little book clubs. So I have 3 or 4 boys and I say, okay, get a book. I'm going to read it with you. We're going to answer the questions. And I know you've said that your books have the questions in the back, which to me, because yes, listeners, I have read the books before he came on as a guest. To me, it was amazing because I can read the books with my students and then kind of send my boys to the back and say, okay, you guys discuss and answer these questions and then submit it to me. And then we'll have another book discussion next week. So it's almost like they're able to independently read and discuss without me. And then they kind of pull me in later on. So why that, and why a curriculum? Like most authors just throw a book out there at us and they go, there you go.
No, I got you. Matter of fact, and I'm sorry, I didn't finish why I put the curriculum, why I put the questions in the back of it. Okay, I put the word hero in each title because I wanted young men and young women to see themselves as heroes. So it was a self-esteem situation there. Now, of course, I didn't know anything about social emotional learning back then because that wasn't a buzzword back then.
Right.
My thing was I care about Black and brown people, particularly boys, just like I was, just like I am before I became a man. And I don't want any of us to be lost, okay? And lost meaning death or jail or just out of the system where people looking at us like we don't count, if you know what I mean. And so putting the questions in the back of the book was something that I wanted to have it engrafted in them. The messages that are there, I wanted the story and the messages to be engrafted in them. And I wanted them to feel as if they're not only reading something, but they're accomplishing something at the same time. Accomplishing a new way of thinking, a new way of going about things, a new way of resolving problems, a new way of giving themselves hope. So I really wanted them. I wanted it to be a metamorphosis between me and the readers, even though there'll be readers that I'll never see, you know what I mean, in person, in many cases. But at least it's something that they can say, wow, it's either my favorite book or I love the book because it does this. And then I also have topics of discussion because I did that because I know a lot of times there are parents, whether they're young or old or just out of touch sometimes, they may not know how to say certain things to their child, right? Whether it's something that comes about sex or boys and girls or being picked on, bullying, whatever the case may be. They may not know how to have, and when I say intelligent question, I don't mean it from a standpoint of being smart. I'm just talking about from a standpoint where they sit, like we're talking now, flat foot, so to speak. They may not know how to do that. But if they look at the topics of discussion, right, they can even ask the question and then talk about what's going on in the book. They can ask the question, talk about what's going on in the book. Talk about the topic of discussion, talk about what's going on in the book. So this is basically a family tool. And mind you, this has been out since 92. So I've been thinking this way long before, again, like I said before, social emotional learning was out, this, on that, and the third. But my thing was, I didn't want my young brothers and sisters to be lost to the system and to the elements. Because my dad, and one of the things that inspired me too, we realized my dad went to jail 3 times, right? But it wasn't until I was maybe about 22 years old that I realized that my dad was really smart. No, I'm sorry, I'm young. I'm not correct on that. I was younger than that. I was about 15 or 16 when I realized that my dad really was smart. And when I say smart, I mean he was brilliant. Right. But then I'm thinking, like, you in jail 3 times. I mean, so certain things came to my mind. That's when I started thinking, man, we can't go to jail to become smart. We got to do this out here. And so there are a lot of factors that went into my mind to want people to make choices on the outside so that they wouldn't have to go inside to have to do them. And so it was a whole lot of stuff. And then of course, I wanted to foster family relationships between parent and child because I know it's not easy for parents, like I said, parents to talk to their children about certain things. It's not easy, It's not, so in other words, even though that was a TV show, everybody's not like the Huxtables. You know what I mean? Everybody's not like that, or the Brady Bunch. So I thought maybe my book would be something that I could use to help foster change. And then when the curriculum come, I know that I think that's a question you want to ask me down the line, but the curriculum is another story. That's on a whole nother level. But just the book itself, it was something that could be used as a powerful learning tool.
It's 2 things in there. So one, the book is very relatable, and it does not matter how you were raised, even though I was raised in a very Cosby-like rural lifestyle, middle class. When I'm reading it, the dynamics of family and relationships, whether they're immediate or you're outside, is still present. And it's still very relatable. The dynamics of the relationship between the guys and the friends in the book, doesn't matter where you grow up or how you grow up, those dynamics were very real to me. And I was like, oh yeah. Okay, how is he gonna handle, like, and it's one of those books where, like I tell my students, if you are really into a book or really into a movie, you start talking to it. You start talking out loud. And I practice it. I show them how to do it in class. And your books are books like that, where you're like, well, wait, what is he gonna do now? Oh man, and that's how, to me, I'm like, this is a great book because I'm talking out loud. I don't know who, nobody's around me, but I am speaking out loud. And you said something that I want to push into and pull some information out from you about. Your books have a curriculum, and we're going to get to that. But where we are now, quarantine, we're in a pandemic, coronavirus, COVID-19, and I have gone into what we call crisis teaching or crisis learning, where students were in school one day and the next day we're not. To even being told this week, where I am in Florida, we will not be returning. We have about 6 weeks of school left. We will not be returning back into the school building. And I'm trying to continue to teach my kids and trying to reach them and doing Zoom. And something that you said that just hit me, where you were like, no, but my books have the questions that parents can also read the books with their child and have dialogue and discussion. And I think that because your books have that, your books are essential to all the time, but they're definitely essential to us right now, where we're trying to put books in the hands of kids and come up with questions, but your books automatically come with the questions for our students to engage with each other and our students to engage with their parents. So I appreciate that part. But then, yes, when did you say, okay, you know what, poor teachers, they over here struggling. let me make their life a little easier.
Yeah, I think it came out of necessity. What they say, what's that saying? Necessity is a form of innovation, something like that. If I got it, you get the idea. By me continuously getting rejected by the publishers, my mindset was, okay, if y'all don't think that, I'm gonna say what really got me. I kept hearing, not right for our list, not right for our list, not right for our list, right? I kept seeing that. And so I'm thinking, like, what is this list? Right? I'm like, what is this list they're talking about? So what I did was I took a trip, and mind you, I went on a bus from Mount Vernon, New York, to a place called White Plains, New York. I went to a Galleria, a mall, and I went to a bookstore, and it was B. Dalton Bookstore at the time. I believe they're out of business now, but it was called B. Dalton Bookstore. I went inside there, and I went into the young adult section, because I'm trying to find out what this list is all about. Right? What are they talking about? So I walked around, and I didn't see anything with my face on it. In other words, I didn't see any books that had young black boys on it, except for one book, and that was written by the late, great Ossie Davis. And the book was titled, because I remember I ended up buying the book, it was called Just Like Martin. And it was a fictional story about Martin Luther King as a child. But I'm looking around, I'm seeing Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, highlights. I'm looking like, what in the world? I ain't see nothing. And then I wanted to wait around to see who was coming inside. And so I'm seeing that, okay, white lady with white daughter. And it's, but it wasn't like heavy traffic. All right, so it wasn't like a lot of people was coming in. So I'm like, okay, they don't think young black boys read. So now I'm insulted. Now, mind you, I went from being a non-reader myself growing up to being this avid reader because I'm writing books. Now I'm offended because I'm like, wait a minute, y'all think we stupid? So I started getting all kinds of thoughts in my head. So that's when I came up with the essay question. So my thought process was, if you don't think that young black boys read my books in bookstores, and mind you, it's not for just black people. My book is for everyone. But my thing was, if you don't think they're going to come to the bookstore, I'm going to come to where they are. So I started thinking. They're in schools, they're in churches, they're in community-based organizations such as YMCAs, boys clubs, this, that, and the third. and the Jack and Jills and stuff of the world. So I said, I'm going to attack those. So being that I had no profanity in there, and and you read the book, I don't degrade any race or any culture, any creed, any religion. No one's degraded. So I said, this book can go anywhere. So my thinking was, let me get the book published, and I'll get in the school system. And then again, that's when everything came into me. It's like, okay, I can help teachers, I can help parents, I can help students, I can help. So my thing was, I'm making it easy for y'all to get what you need to get. Let me just get it into your hands. And so by those publishers not finding my book worthy for their press, made a blessing for me, to where, again, I'm celebrating almost 30 years in publication. Being that I took it the way I took it the way I did it, and schools are my main source of clientele. I don't even, to be honest with you, I don't even try to do bookstore, but I don't even try to do book signings in stores. Bookstores. I have no use for going to a bookstore. For one, young people don't go to bookstores anyway. So I'll just be sitting in there. But if I go to a church, I got a line out the door. If I go to a school, I got a line down the hall. Okay, I go to community-based organizations, I got a line out the door. Or if I get in with a health company, when it was like a Affinity Health Plan or something like that, jumping with those, when they buy books and sponsor kids, I'm good. So I started thinking, do innovative thinking, and God bless that all. But I found a way to get it to the kids. Don't have to worry about going to a publisher. Go to where the kids are.
That is amazing. And I think that is there. You said that earlier where you were like, I was being rejected, but I kept going. And I think you're able to show us and speak into us that you're able to, this door, I always tell my students, everything is figure outable, and no is not always the final answer. It's just that the answer from that person. So who else do you need to go to? And I think that what you said to us about just the book and just creating and where you needed to promote your book and how you need to promote your book is fascinating. And as an educator, yes, thank you. I cannot explain to you how many times we receive stuff or we review items and we have them, and then if we feel like it's incomplete because we don't have the questions, or I have this, but now I have to create an entire curriculum around this. No, I don't have time for that. And so when your book came and I was like, oh, wait, and you give us the answer key. Anyone is listening, anything you want to give to educators, if you do not include an answer key, we don't want it. If we don't want it, we don't have time to look for it. Send us the answer key. And
I should also put a unit assessment in it as well. So you can assess the students from beginning to end. So we have pre questions, or pre-curriculum questions, as well as those for post.
Yes, and so basically, educators, homeschool parents, it isn't a complete unit set of curriculum. So we do our diagnostic pre-reading, we're reading, we have chapter questions, thought-provoking discussion questions, our end of reading questions, our unit assessments, and he breaks it down per objective and standard. So I hear the other teachers screaming, like, how can I get this? Because this is like what we need. Like once we find that and we read it and we know it's quality, we have no problem purchasing. So I'm going to switch really quick, but I'm going to come back because I know you are also a professor. Can you speak about that? Tell us what you do and give us a little background behind that career also.
I sort of fell into that. A good buddy of mine, Cliff Benton, Professor Cliff Benton, he was my literary agent. But then he ended up becoming not just my literary agent, but my friend. All right, so he doesn't represent me anymore as an agent, but he's still my big brother. And so he would always have me come to his classes. And of course, when I said I'm a paid motivational speaker, but for him, I wouldn't charge him. And so he had me come into his classes. He taught at a college called Mercy College at LIU Brooklyn, and then LIU, right? And so he would have me come. I think he started me coming to him in 2008, right? So I would go back maybe 4 or 5 times a year. I would just visit, and I would go and speak to his class and meet some of his students and, sort of network a little bit. One year, it was 2014, he was like, well, why don't you apply for a job here? And I'm thinking, I'm not qualified to be a professor and this and the third. Now, not knowing that he had actually tricked me. He had tricked me once to teach his grad class like 3 days. There was 3 different sessions. He had me just come up with some stuff. And then he didn't tell me until afterwards. He was like, well, you know, that was my grad class, right? Graduate class. I'm like, huh? He said, yeah, those are graduate students. I was like, no wonder they would ask me a certain kind of question. He said, yeah, and you said, he said, you did that like it was nothing, you know? And so I'm thinking, okay. So this one day he had me speak at LIU Brooklyn, and he says, why don't you, try to see if you can get a job here? I'm like, I don't know anybody here. I'm like, whatever. So he said, I got somebody I want you to meet. I'm gonna show you how the Lord works, and I'm gonna show you how this thing, it got really bizarre. And this is why I tell students, and something that teachers, please, if you're listening, tell your students this: do not napalm the bridge. Now, I didn't just say burn the bridge. Don't napalm it, right? Because you never know what can happen. I'm gonna tell you why in a second. So we go to see this man, right? And this is an older white man. I love him. I call him Uncle Gene, my boss. And I guess he was in the late 60s, right? And so we're talking, and before we get into anything, my buddy says, Mr. Hoover, why don't you tell Professor Spatz what you're doing? Now, I forgot, I didn't tell you this. I'm a filmmaker also, so we'll get into that a little bit later. So it's a documentary I'm working on. I was working on called My Friend, My Hero. No, I'm sorry, 4 Square Miles to Glory, which is about the basketball players that came from Mount Vernon and made it into the NBA. All right, it's 10 of them, which is remarkable for a 4 square mile town. All right, but we're still working on that. But long story short, the gentleman, Professor Spatz, says, "Oh, Mount Vernon." He says, "Oh, I was just there last week." So I'm thinking that he just drove by and drove through. Well, it's no big deal. We got highways that come through Mount Vernon, and I ain't think anything of it. Now, mind you, my buddy didn't know this either, so this is all new to him too. So he says, "My father-in-law works there. Lives there." So I said, okay. I'm thinking, all right, he lives. And then when he told me the street, I knew the street they lived on. I knew he wasn't on my side of town. He was on the other side. I didn't think anything of it. And then he says, now, mind you, I'm there. I'm dressed in a suit. I have a briefcase and everything because I already just gave a speech at my buddy's class. So he says, maybe you know him. Now, my first thought was like, why would I know this older white man? He's older than you. Why would I know him? That's what I was thinking in my head, right? So he says he used to own a fabric store, and before he can get the word out of his mouth, I jump up from the chair I was sitting in, stuff falls on the floor, and I say, Jack and Milton. And he said, so you know them? I said, I used to work for him. He said, Milton is my father-in-law. I said, yeah, Westchester Fabrics. And from there, it just exploded. Okay. Right. So I went from the interview never happened. He just basically said, we started talking. He just said, well, I'll tell you what, being that you never taught class before, I'm going to let you sit in, Bob will pay you, but I'm going to let you learn from Professor Benton and someone else, and you'll share the class. And if you do good, then I'll get your own class. So that's how that happened. And needless to say, when I did my time, I went there, watched, did what I had to do. And again, it was second nature for me because I'm teaching sports and teaching life too with sports and the business of sports. So it's a whole thing that I was able to do. And then once he saw that, he gave me a book and said, come up with a curriculum for this. No, I'll come up with a syllabus for this. Yes. I did that, Miss Gordon, and bam, 6 years later, I'm still teaching it. I didn't go the traditional route.
I don't think you like traditional routes.
But here's the thing. Now, what was so amazing about that was that man, I used to work for him for 3 years, the man's father-in-law. When I was a kid, when I was from age 14 to 17, my grandmother, she's gone now, she was a seamstress. And she one day was like, Jack, Milton, hire my grandson. Now, I'm going to tell you how things got really weird. He says, hire my grandson. And he says, okay, Hilda, send him in, we'll hire him. Now, man didn't know me from Adam's cat. Right. So basically, he just said, okay. So I go in there, they hire me. Now, mind you, I was too young to really work with the hours that they gave me. But my grandmother was a good customer. He let me do it. Now, my job was to get fabric from either the attic or the basement, or even cut fabric on the floor whenever they had time. But there were times when, if they got too busy, they may say, Jerald, get the register. So they trusted me to get money and go and do my business. Now, one thing about it, I never stole from them, never disrespectful, and I've always maintained some sort of a friendship with them. I just didn't know this man at the time. I didn't know the owner's daughter-in-law, the son-in-law. But just think about this. Had I been a person that stole from them, respectful to them,
right,
the job that I went for 30 years later would have been gone. He could have easily said, we changed our mind, we got somebody else. Or he could have said, certain things happened, we couldn't do it.
Right.
But the fact that he was able to vouch for me, because here's where it gets even weirder. I had just visited the store, just walking past, the street, walking in 2 weeks before I met this man. So I just walked in, kind of did the check on them, because they sold it since then. But I just went in and just said hello, because they had it for a long time. But just think about that. From 14 years old to over 40 years old, 30-something years later, 34 years later, still kept a maintained relationship and respect to the point to where they had no problem with bringing me in to hire me. And when Professor Spatz had a chance to hire me, he just did it right then. Like you said, non-traditional.
Non-traditional. And it's two things that we are constantly telling our students. Constantly. One is, no matter where you go, you're representing your family, and you need to make sure that you represent them well, because you never know who knows your family. And two, I tell my students all the time, it takes one act or incident to change the trajectory of your life. So like you said, you could have been a not great worker back when you were younger, and 20, 25, 30 years later down the road, it would have hindered you to move it into the next stage. So thank you so much for that. I am going to do our last two questions for our interview. So we are called an Education Concierge Podcast because we discuss and coordinate all aspects of and for education. So when my guests come on, I say to them, hey, back in the day, a concierge was at the hotel, and you would come and you would check in and you would go down to the concierge and you would say, I want to go to this restaurant, I want tickets to this event, and the concierge would make it happen. So my first question to you is, if you could have tickets to any production, any restaurant, any place, money is not an object, the concierge is going to handle it, where would it be, or what would it be, and why?
The restaurant, I would say probably Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. The food there is phenomenal, very expensive. You can pick your own meat from the glass. You can pick either your own meat and your own steak or your own lobster, which is very high class. And as far as, I guess, the theater show, I haven't seen it yet, but I would say probably Hamilton.
Okay. And tell me why Hamilton?
I've heard rave reviews about it in terms of the musical stuff, the content, and how it even originated. And then it's about Alexander Hamilton, but it's sort of done with a uptick, with a beat to it, if you would. It wasn't something that was probably lauded when it first came out, but it just grew to where it's a phenomenon now. So that's probably why. Or anything August Wilson does, you can't beat him.
Yeah.
Anytime Denzel Washington does something, that August Wilson does, it's top notch.
Right. I love it. Okay. And then, because we're an education podcast, I always ask my guests to tell me what school they attended and if they are a member of Divine Nine or any other organization. And I know, because I looked at your bio a couple of times, that you went to a school across the water from me.
Dominating basketball, too. We should dominate basketball and football.
I'm a CIAA baby. There's no doubt about it. Yes, you did.
I got the scope was happening back then.
You attended a historically Black college and university. So can you please tell us loud and proud where you attended?
Norfolk State University. It was at 201 Corporal Avenue, Norfolk, New York. Spartans. Green and gold.
Could not take it. So yes, he is a Spartan from across the bridge from Hampton.
Y'all were blue and white. The Navy blue and white. Whatever blue y'all call that.
It's whatever. It's the royal blue. No.
Yeah. Okay. Royal blue. Okay. We'll go with that.
We have nothing but HBCU love on here. I've had Pirates. Now I have you're my first Spartan. I've had some Howard Bisons on. And so we definitely we always promote, one thing I know about HBCU alum, we think our school is the best school.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah, well, my son went to, graduated, and his wife did too. He went to Prairie View.
Oh, geez.
And I think they were the Panthers, I believe it was. They're purple and white, and that's one of the oldest. Well, it's in the top 3 as oldest HBCUs that were built, and they were built from an extension of Texas A&M, because the people there didn't want them, so they kind of had to move into a certain area, and that's where they made Prairie View, and they've been up and running ever since.
Yeah, so that's important.
HBCU love.
Always important for us to understand why and how HBCUs were originated and how important they are into developing the amazing Black men and women that come out.
One thing before we end this pandemic has really showed to me the disparity on a lot of things, and it's very important. It's very incumbent upon our parents and children alike to really hone in on education and skill level, right? Because you have, say, 40,000 people that have lost their lives, and it makes no sense that almost half are people of color, and we only make up less than 15% probably. It goes from 12 to 18% of the people in this country, but still, you still got another 80+ percentage that's people of not of color. So why is it that almost half are in that range that they've died? Okay, so you got to look at poor health, socioeconomics, the density in where they live, where in some ways where they're shoved to live. I mean, if you get a person that lives in a sort of a project building, if you will, we call projects in New York, we call like high-rise buildings. You got 100 families living in a 10-story edifice, if you would. You don't think people are going to touch things, touch your face? I mean, the virus is going to walk. It's going to walk in people's apartments.
Yes. In
some ways, you know what I mean. And so that's why you're going to have all these positive tests. And it's just a mess. But here's where young Black men, in particular, have got to understand that reading and writing has got to be as important as breathing, eating, and sleeping. It has to be that deep, because if you look at our forefathers from from way back, and I'm talking about just the slaves, I'm talking about even from the civil rights movement, one of the things that they were trying to champion was equal rights and education as well, and they stood for something. So education back then was a key. It was a key. Now those doors have been closed because we're shutting them. And now if you go to most metropolitan cities, you don't find too many Black men walking in office buildings with suits and ties on. You may see Black men working, but especially here in New York, you see a lot of them working security. Now, I don't have a problem with anybody, let me make this clear. I don't have a problem with anybody earning a living. Hey, listen, do what you got to do. That's legal. Earn it. But I don't want Black and brown boys to be shut out of places because they're not qualified.
Right.
If working security, hey, I'm with you. You go do your thing. But that's not where you should be earmarked, if you know what I mean. You know, and especially in the same building that you've seen everybody else is getting car keys, pass keys, they're going up to the 10th, 11th floor, wherever they're working at. You know, that can't be the case. We can't be subject to working just in the mailroom.
Right.
Okay, you can't keep doing that now. We should be able to wear suits and ties, go on to office buildings as well. But if young men in particular aren't reading books, aren't writing, aren't computing, aren't doing certain things that they have to do from a intellectual standpoint, then it's easy for them to say you're not qualified. And one of the things I'm fearful about even with the homeschooling is that I don't want this to be a thing where people think that they can just learn things through a computer, because a computer is not going to teach you anything.
No.
I'm not talking about learning something on YouTube. I'm talking about using their brain to rationalize things, analyze things, to figure things out, to do this and that. You know, computers aren't going to do that. Computers, if you're not careful, smartphones make you stupid because you're not using certain parts of the brain. And that's the thing that I'm fearing more than anything. Is this is why I know my book is old school, if you would, because it's brick and mortar, and my curriculum is brick and mortar. But if our babies cannot read and write and sign their name, you tell me what kind of jobs they're going to be able to get. If they can't tell time on the clock and they can't sign their name when they're 18 years old, where will they be able to find work?
I think one of the most important things you stated is what we're constantly going to have to adjust and answer as we move forward. Education will never be the same after this school year. After school year 2019, 2020, we will never teach like we've taught before. We will have to come outside of the box. We will have to include technology, but as everybody knows, my first philosophy is we have to set the foundation. You can't build a house on the foundation. And reading and writing and math and critical thinking have to be the foundation. And then we have to build everything else up. So I appreciate your parting words. That was a perfect ending to our interview for today. Thank you so much, Mr. Hoover, for coming on the Education Concierge podcast.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Have a great day.